Hello, Ames Chambers of Commerce members. This is Drew Camp, Vice President with the Ames Chamber of Commerce, here for our June 5th weekly legislative update. The session's now fully back in session after their 3 months off. They went back on Wednesday, but in addition to some of the things they're working on in the legislature, I wanted to touch on a few things other than that at the state level that are some good things that are positive trends and show positive news for going forward. I also wanted to touch on some federal policy items and then finally close up with just a little bit of a roundup of what happened in the election, the primary election on Tuesday. So to start with some positive news at the state level, Iowa received a $26.2 million emergency education relief to extend broadband access grant. And what that will really do is it'll allow them to look at different areas that are being impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. And we've seen a lot of things with remote work and teleconferencing and telecommuting and things like that. So now more than ever, we're seeing where internet deserts, where there's not the connectivity and the service that needs to be provided is more important than ever. So what they're going to be able to do is they're going to be able to take that and that it's part of a about $3 billion grant that the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund authorized by the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Securities Act, or the CARES Act, gave out throughout the country, but we got the $26.2 million of those funds. But what that'll do is it'll allow us to go through and shore up some of those dead zones throughout the state. And that's hugely important, especially as we look at teleeducation with individuals who are obviously doing remote learning as well as remote working. So that's really big deal. We were really happy to see that money come in because that's at the state level. It came from the feds being doled out by the states, but then there's also other state and federal resources that can be leveraged to even multiply that. So that's really good news that I wanted to start off with at the very top of things. There are some new unemployment benefit programs available to Iowans as well. The IWD, or Iowa Workforce Development, announced late last week information regarding 2 unemployment benefit programs now available to Iowans. It's the Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation, which was also created by the CARES Act and provides an additional 13 weeks of federally funded benefits to individuals who have exhausted their 26 weeks of regular state unemployment benefits. The state extended benefits have also been triggered, and that means unemployed workers who have exhausted their allotted weeks of regular state unemployment and then used the 13 weeks of federal PEUC, or the Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation benefits, will now be eligible for states' extended benefits, which provide them an additional 13 weeks of regular unemployment benefits, while the state extended benefits is triggered on in Iowa. So that obviously helps them at the federal and state level because both of those obviously play a role in paying out of unemployment. The weekly benefit for the state extended benefits is the same amount as an individual receives for regular unemployment benefits and the Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation. I wanted to touch on those things first because those are obviously positive things. We have seen unemployment at the national and state level go down with claims as people return to work as the economy reopens. That's obviously a positive thing as well. We want to be focusing on those things because we really need to make sure that we're pushing those positive messages forward as we continue to grow and move forward into this new era and this new economy. So another piece I wanted to touch on the state side is with some of the policy issues that we've seen just from Wednesday to today. They're in session today, actually, working. They're going to try to get out next week, if at all possible. They have budget targets internally. The governor's putting out a budget as well to kind of lead the conversations. But those budget targets that the House and the Senate have aren't public yet. But for sure, they are working out within their appropriations committees and appropriate subcommittees and appropriation committees in their respective chambers to conclude by Father's Day at the latest. If they do not want to be there past that, that gives them a good week before the new fiscal year kicks in on July 1st. A couple items I wanted to hit on that we're really watching closely as a Chamber Alliance and as a chamber. There's really conversations about a path for placemaking, and that'd be through Enhance Iowa, which is the rebranded Vision Iowa. And we're working with Iowa Economic Development Authority and Debbie and her team to really make sure we're all on the same page and rowing in the same direction to protect not only her budget and her priorities, but also make sure we're all preaching from and singing from the same hymnal as we go and make these requests, because that's going to be really important as we all make sure that we're getting the bills passed that we need to in this very abbreviated session. On the federal level, I really wanted to focus on just a few things, and it's the Paycheck Protection Loan Program. The House passed it last week, the Senate passed it this week. It's now being signed into law by the president. There's some new updated changes to the Paycheck Protection Loan Program, specifically targeted to the loan forgiveness, which is a big issue our businesses have been facing. I do want to hit on some of the high-level pieces that bill did provide. It creates a floor of 5 years for loan maturity. It extends the covered period for obtaining and using a loan until December 31st of 2020, and that's from earlier it adds 6 months to that period. For purposes of loan forgiveness, it redefines the covered period to begin on the date of loan origination and the end on the earlier of either the day that is 24 weeks after loan origination or December 31st of this year. For purposes of avoiding a reduction in the amount of loan forgiveness, it extends the date of rehire of employees to the 31st of December of 2020 as well. That's back from July, that was in the earlier bill. For purposes of avoiding reduction in the amount of loan forgiveness, it creates an exemption from the rehiring requirement where the employer is able to document an inability to hire individuals who were employees on February 15th of 2020 or an inability to hire similarly qualified employees for unfilled positions on or before 12/31 of 2020, or an inability to return to the same level of business activity as such businesses were operating on or before February 15th of 2020 due to compliance with requirements established or guidance issued by Health and Human Services, Centers for Disease Control, or OSHA during the period beginning March 1st and ending December 31st, and that's related to the maintenance of standard for sanitation, social distancing, or any other worker or customer safety requirement related to COVID-19. That is some fine legal jargon for you right there. It requires, as a condition of loan forgiveness, that at least 60% of the loan be used to cover payroll costs. That's down from 75%. That's a good concession. It extends the loan deferment period to the date on which the amount of forgiveness is remitted to the lender, and it provides that a borrower that fails to apply for loan forgiveness within 10 months after the last day of the covered period shall make payments of principal, interest, and fees beginning no earlier than the date that is 10 months after the last day of such covered period. And it allows an employer that receives a PPP loan to defer the deposit and payment of its share of Social Security tax that is due after the loan is forgiven. So essentially, as you can see, it really provides some additional benefits with loan forgiveness and provides some additional clarity that our businesses really needed. We had a lot of businesses sitting on those funds because they were scared of what might happen if they used them in potential clawbacks. So this is a really important bill to give them additional clarity on what they need to expect if they are to use those funds. Another important program I wanted to touch on is the Main Street Lending Program, and that's within the Fed. And those loans are ranging in size, they're larger, so they're ranging in size from $500,000 to $200 million and are designed to assist medium and small businesses that were in good financial position and receive government-backed credit. To assist in their recovery and ongoing operations, and they'll offer 4-year loans with floating rates based on the size of the loan and principal and interest payments deferred until the first year to assist businesses facing temporary cash flow interruptions. We expect this program to go live really soon. We've been working with our senators and our House members to really make sure we're getting all the information possible. You'll see it in this email. You'll see it in other emails subsequently to make sure that it's made available so they can access it. And make sure that they're making those benefits available as much as possible. You will need to work through a lender for that, similar to the PPP program. Another piece that I want to touch on is Phase 4 continues to be talked about, looking at unemployment, the unemployee retention tax credit, additional improvements to Paycheck Protection Program, adding C6s, which is what the chambers and business associations are, to the Paycheck Protection Program eligible entities. That's something we now expect to probably see coming in July. They really want to make sure that they're vetting the CARES Act and 3.5, the piece that really put more money into the Paycheck Protection Program and EIDL and such, to see where that money is going, how it's being used, what state and local governments have gotten, what they're using it, and what money they still have left before they look at providing additional funds. We've gone over $5 trillion in debt as a federal government since middle of March. So that's something they're being very cautious about on both sides of the aisle, and they both understand. And the last thing I want to touch on is the primary election that happened on Tuesday. The biggest race on the ticket was the statewide race for the Democratic nominee to take on Senator Joni Ernst in November. Teresa Greenfield won that pretty convincingly. They called that very early in the night. So she will take on Joni Ernst, Senator Ernst, in November. So that is a race that a lot of people have their eye on. There's already a lot of money pouring into the state from outside groups for that race. We will also see a lot of money pouring into the race in the 1st Congressional District, where it will be Ashley Hinson versus Abby Finkenauer, and also in the 3rd District and the 4th District. 3rd District is going to be a rematch of David Young and Cindy Axne. The 4th District is an open seat because Congressman Loebsack is retiring after a lot of years of great service, which we thank him for. But Senator Rita Hart, who was Fred Hubbell's running mate as an LG, she is running on the Democratic ticket, and Marionette Miller Meeks won on the Republican side, so that'll be an open seat as well. It tends to lean a little bit towards the Democratic side, but it's going to be a very competitive race as well. The last one I wanted to touch on is obviously our congressional race, and J.D. Scholten is the nominee for the Democrats, but the news obviously was the fact that 9-term Congressman Steve King was defeated by Randy Feenstra, who's a state senator from Hull. He's been really good to work with. He's been the chair of Ways and Means, which is a critical committee to economic development as we look at tax incentives, TIF, things along those lines. He's been a good partner, and we thank him for his efforts in getting into the federal race, and we look forward to working with him or J.D. Scholten, depending on who wins in November, to represent our district. In Iowa Senate District 24, that's to fill the seat vacated by retiring Senator Jerry Bayne. I do want to take a moment to note the fact that Senator Bayne is currently the longest serving member of his caucus. That means he's Senate President pro tem. He's been in the Senate since 1996. So it's something we really want to make sure we highlight that, because that is a very long time to serve your state, and we really want to thank him for his service as he prepares to leave at the end of this year. He's been so great to work with, and we really, really thank Senator Bayne for his work. So the race will then be to replace Senator Bayne will be Cindy Passion on the Democratic side versus Jesse Green on the Republican side. In Representative Ross Wilburn's seat, which was previously held by Lisa Heddens, both him and Beth Wessel-Krishel will run unopposed. Rob Bacon will take on Jack Friend in the Iowa House District 48. In District 49, incumbent Dave Dio, who's a Republican, will take on Selden Spencer, a Democrat from Huxley. And then finally, for the Story County Board of Supervisors seat being vacated by Supervisor Olson, we also want to thank Loris for her service on the board. She's been really good to work with, especially with issues like housing and transportation, workforce transit. So we want to commend Loris for her efforts. She also served on the AADC exec committee as well, so we thank her as well for her efforts. To replace her on the Board of Supervisors, it'll be Latifah Feisel representing the Democratic caucus and Steve O'Rourke representing the Republican caucus, and then Lisa Heddens will run unopposed. So those are really the things that I wanted to make sure I highlighted this week. We'll once again we won't have an election obviously or anything like that to go over next week, but we will have plenty of things on the state side, really down from the state legislature come next week. So please do come back and listen in next week as we hope to hopefully have adjournment sine die or without date of the legislative session by then, and we'll know some budgets and a lot of different good things to share with you. So thank you very much for watching, and come back next week. Have a good weekend.